This is game 2 of Preptest 75, the June 2015 LSAT. This is a basic grouping game. It's basic because each variable is only used once, and the 1, 2, and 3 designations of the groups, that's not a linear. Those are just labels for the group. So we're not going to have anything like H is before L or M is before H or anything like that. Those are just labels. Let's go to the rules. Rule 1 tells us that H, O, and exactly one other variable. When it says exactly one other variable, that's limiting us to only 3 variables, the H, O, and the other variable. We're told that that forms a single group. Right now I'm thinking frames. I'm not going to go ahead and draw the frames out yet because the other rules may dictate that this little group right here is only going to be confined to 2 possibilities, perhaps even 1. We don't know yet, but just to show you what's going on in my head at this point, and I'm getting excited because I love frames. We can have the group in 1. We can have the group in 2, or we can have the group in 3. And by the way, just remember we're going to make ticks over the variables when we used one because ultimately we're going to want to identify and see if there's any floaters. Moving to rule 2, we're just told that M and W can't go together. There's not anything at this point for me to mix together or group together different rules. And there's nothing for me on the main diagram for me to put that there. Rule 3 tells me that either L or W have to go in group 1, and I just made a line below them. So what's that saying is that there's just one slot for the 2 of them, so you can't have both. There's only one slot, and obviously it indicates that either the L or the W have to go there. Rule 4 is the same, it's just for the M and O in group 2. Rule 5 is interesting. It says there has to be more variables in 3 than 1, and at this point the first thing I'm thinking is that HO block, the HO and the other variable. I want to know, it seems just off the bat that it's going to be tough to put that in 1. And in fact, it is going to be tough to put that in 1. And just to show you, if we put the H and O in 1, that's going to give us 3 variables in 1. And of course, we know that in 2, there has to be at least 1 variable because either M and O have to go there. So then in order to have more variables in 3 than in 1, we're going to need at least 4. But the problem is this gives us now a minimum of 8 variables. But we're only given 7 variables. So the HO block cannot go in 1. That's going to be confined to either group 2 or 3. And here's where we make our frames. Let's start with putting the HO and additional variable block in group number 2. What I'm thinking here is distribution. So check this out. We know we have exactly 3 variables in group number 2 because we have the HO additional variable. That's just a rule. We also know that we have at least 1 variable in group 1 because either L or W have to go there. So the question is, how many variables are going to go in 3? So we have 4 more variables to distribute between 1 and 3 because 2 is obviously closed off. So we have 4 to distribute between 1 and 3. And we know that automatically we have to have at least 1 in group 1. So our first possibility is going to be 3 and 1. 3 and 3 and 1 and 1. The question is, at this point, are there any other distributions? And there's not. Can we add 1 from 3 to group 1, group 3 to group 1? We can't. Because if we do that, then we're going to be left with 2 and 2. And we can't have that because 3 has to have more than 1. So now we know how many have to go in each slot. There's only going to be 1 in group 1. And now we know that you have to have 3 in group 3. The other thing to consider is this. What can be that variable in group 2, the additional variable? We know that you have to have either M or O there. And as you see, we have O there. And since O is there, we can't have M there. And M obviously can't be in group 1 because either L or W is going to be there and nothing else. So the remaining possibility for M is going to be group 3. That's the only other place we can put it. So now we only have 3 remaining variables. We've got the P and the S, and then just the remainder of the L or W. And here's a good opportunity to bring up something interesting about the P and S. Because they're floaters, they're interchangeable. Any rule that applies to P also applies to S. So take a look at something like this. So think about this for a second. In a situation like this, neither A nor B can be the correct answer. And that's because anything that must be true about P also has to be true about S because they're floaters. Any rule that applies to P applies to S. They're interchangeable. And in that regard, when we see answer choices that are putting both in the same place or they're describing identical relations, neither of them can be true because nothing can be true about P without being true about S. And when you have a case like this, obviously there's only one right answer choice, and so therefore neither answer choice can be correct. Just something to consider when going through games. And just one more thing you might want to add. Rule 2 tells us that M and W can't go together. We obviously know that if M and W can't go together, then the available variables for the remaining two slots are going to be P, S, and L. But that just seems like it's a little too much. It seems like overkill to go ahead and put that in our frame. For frame B, we're going to put the HO, an additional variable block, in group 3. In terms of distribution, I'm not thinking much because we have 3 in group 3. We know that we have to have 1 in group 1. We could have an additional one, theoretically. We could have 2 in 1, and then 2 more in group 2, I think. I'm not sure. I'm not going to really test that at this point. What I'm interested in is the fact that either M or O have to be in group 2. But we know that O is no longer a contender because we've put O in group 3. So if that's the case, we know that M is going to be in group 2. And of course, we know L or W has to be in group 1. And then we're just left with the same variables that we had before. And if you want, you can make the indication that W cannot go with M. So in frame A, we know that W has to go in 1 or 2. And in frame B, W has to go in 1 or 3. These are it. These are my frames. And off the bat, I know that they're going to be very useful in attacking these questions with relatively good speed, I would imagine. Question 7, just a basic starter question for any game. We have 5 rules here, so obviously not all rules are going to be used because that would mean we're eliminating 5 answer choices, but we only have 5 answer choices. So starting with rule 1, we see that answer choice A violates rule 1. That has the H and O together, but that's missing the third variable that has to be with them. Looking at rule 2, in fact, there are no violations of rule 2. The M and W are always apart. Looking to rule 3, we see that C needs to be eliminated because rule 3 tells us that either L or W need to be in there, but that doesn't have L or W in there, so C is going to be out. Looking to rule 4, we're going to see that E violates that. That doesn't have the M or the O in 2, and we need one of them in there. Finally, B violates rule 5. We need more in 3 than in 1. And in B, we have an equal number in 1 and 3. Our answer is going to be D. Question 8 is very simple. All we're doing is looking at frame A. That's the one that puts the H, O, an additional variable in slot 2. And 8 is asking us to put the H in slot 2 or group 2. And we know that's something that's a deduction that we made, that M has to go in 3. For question 9, we know that neither H nor O can ever be in slot 1. So that means that A and B are going to be out. Both have H. D is also out because remember, any rule that applies to P also applies to S. So if P could be planted in slot 1, then S would also have to be available to be planted in slot 1. But S is not listed there, therefore D has to be out. And finally, for answer choice E, we see, if we just look at frame A, that either L or W can go in 1. So E is going to be out. C is the correct answer. Question 10, if we're putting W in lot 3, then we know that we can't be dealing with frame A. W can't go in 3 in frame A because we've got the M there, and M and W can't go together. So we're going to be only working with frame B here. And if W is in 3 and we know either L or W have to go in 1, W is no longer available. So L has got to be the one that's in group 1. That leaves us with only P and S as variables. And so the answer choice is obviously going to involve either P or S. So our answer choice is going to be A, because obviously either P or S, you can't have both because you can't have 3 in 1, but either P or S can go in slot 1. 11 is asking us which variable, if placed in group 2, will completely determine where all the other variables go. If we look at B and C, B is S and C is P, and we know that those function equivalently. So if S were to completely determine the order, then P would also have to completely determine the order as well. But you can only have one right answer, so B and C are going to be out. D is out because we could just take a quick look at frame B, and we can see there's a lot of variability there. We have the P, S, and the L or W. We can play with those in multiple different ways. We could put the P here and the L here and keep the W here, and we could put the S here. Or we could also just switch the S and the P around. We might have more options. It really doesn't matter. That leaves us with A and E. With respect to A, we know that the W cannot go in slot 2 in frame B, so we're only going to be testing that with respect to frame A. If we put the W in the 2, then the L has got to go in slot 1. And that's obviously going to force the P and the S in slot 3. So our answer is going to be A.